Hi everyone, my name is Angie and this is me, Manager Habitat. I am back with a new PC build. It's not exactly mine. This time I'm back with a Threadripper. So we actually got a Threadripper for the office. Reason being, like most of our events are still like, not most, like half of our events are still virtual. So we had occasions whereby we needed a lot of input into a PC so that we can run it in a vMix software. But it was a bit strange having like 5-6 USB dongles coming out of a PC, so we decided to add like capture cards into our PC, and the only motherboard that could kind of support the amount of inputs that we wanted to add on was a Threadripper system. So it's very overkill, but it's what we required. So this whole setup cost about $7,000. It's around there. We bought, I felt, was a little bit lesser stuff compared to my own PC build. So well, it was a bit strange when I was building the computer. I've always felt like something was missing, like I was missing something, and I actually did forget something. So we'll get to that later. This video is also a bit different. I'm recording this like narration thing at home when I've actually built the PC like a month ago in the office. We've been using it for a month. Reason being, we actually shifted office since the last time I recorded something in the office, which was I think the DJI battery teardown. So our new office has a relatively high ceiling and it makes everything really echoey. So I can't really record voices properly. So I decided to just fix up the computer in the office and I will record this whole segment at home. Yeah, so a quick rundown of all the parts that we got. We've got the Be Quiet Dark Base 900. I'm not sure whether we got the Pro or the non-Pro version, I can't remember. So it's a full-size tower, it's humongous, it's half my height. I was struggling so much trying to get it onto the table. And like that was the bare chassis, like I haven't fit anything inside there yet. I could like barely carry it myself after everything was like done. So this chassis was supposed to be modular. Like you're supposed to be able to like turn it upside down like the other way around, but never figured out exactly how to do that, so I just left it in its basic configuration. Which, come to think of it, I should have tried like flipping it the other way around, because it would be nice to have the chassis open on the right side instead. Yeah, but anyway. So another reason why we got this chassis is also because it has this like really nice orange trim, which is in line with our company branding. But it was a case that we're supposed to bring out onto like for our outdoor shows as well. So transport was a problem. Is a problem. So we need to figure that out. So that's the chassis. We've also got the 3960X. It's a 24-core CPU. And for the motherboard, we got the Asus Zenith 2 Extreme Alpha. We had a hard time finding, like, buying this particular motherboard because it was like sort of everywhere. Now that we think about it, it might be because AMD was like releasing a 3rd gen Threadripper. Yeah, so it could be because of that, but yeah, so we got the Asus Zenith 2 Extreme Alpha. It has a TR4 connector, so it works with the 3960. It also came with a lot of stickers. These are mine now, by the way. Like, boss, if you're seeing this, this is my payment for building the computer. I'm keeping everything. These are so nice. So like they even included like cable labels for you here. Like if you want to like label all your cables with this, you can. And there's like battery stickers. Yeah, these fan labels even. Like these are fan labels. So I'm keeping everything. And then the Threadripper came with this sticker as well as like the small one, like the kind that you paste on the inside of a laptop, like when you open up, and then on the front panel where your keyboard and trackpad is, there's like a small sticker of the graphics card, not graphics card, the processor used. So most of the time we've been seeing Intel, but there's a small Threadripper one that I've pasted on my MacBook. The irony, right? A MacBook running a Threadripper. So that's that, and then the Asus also came with this like badge thing. It's not a sticker, or it is a sticker, but it's like the really thick kind. So that's this as well. So I am keeping all of these stickers. Yeah, so that's the motherboard. We've got the EVGA FTW3 3070 graphics card. It was a relatively cheap graphics card that we could get that was in stock because of like the shortage everywhere. We didn't need something that was like fancy because it's gonna be an enclosed case. It's actually a really bulky graphics card. Like the card was like 3 unit thick. I forgot what was the measurement for the back of the PC. But yeah, it was a really thick card, which almost blocked one of the PCIe slots, like the second lane on the PCIe. It almost blocked it, but because we got a Threadripper system, everything still works. We have 2 more slots, PCIe slots at the bottom that we could use. So that was actually the main reason why we got a Threadripper, because of the amount of power the CPU could support on the motherboard. So like, typically your motherboard, by the time you get to the last PCIe lane, is usually like a PCIe 4 lane, or like a PCIe Gen 3 8 lane, that sort of thing. But and then your first 2 lane of PCIe typically shares the bandwidth. So if you populate something in your second lane, your first lane is only running at 8 times speed, versus a Threadripper, even if you were to populate every single lane with something, it's typically running at 16 lane, 8 lane, 16 lane, 8 lane. So your speed is not affected if you were to populate a lot of things in. So some people actually put in 2 graphics cards on the 16 lane PCIe slots. But for our case, we are populating it with ingest cards because that's what we require. Now the motherboard was so fancy, like the box that it came in. It's like one of those like gaming loot box, you know. It doesn't feel like I'm buying a computer part. It feels like I'm buying like a collectible. Like the box is really well made. Like it opens up and there's this like hinge. Like compared to my own motherboard, I mean my motherboard was like 1/4 the price, but you know. Yeah, it's really well made. And it even came in like this tray that you can just take your motherboard out of. Like with my own motherboard for my own PC, like I have to fumble with the actual motherboard itself because I was afraid that I would touch the back of the motherboard. But with this, like I don't need to worry because it came with its own tray, and I just have to take out the entire tray, and everything's below, like in its own little like segments within the box. It was super well made. And then fixing in the NVMe, we actually had an old NVMe that we bought to try, but we never got to using it as like our edit SSD because like we are mostly on laptops, MacBook Pros, and that kind of throttles the speed a little bit, so we don't get to enjoy the full speed of the NVMe disk in any case. So we repurposed that particular NVMe stick into the PC itself. I think I could have removed the entire front panel where the NVMe slots are without removing that silver bracket at the side, but it didn't feel like I could. So I just took out everything. And then I fit the NVMe disk in. I did forget to remove the sticker from the heat shrink, so I had to reopen this part again and fit it in. But otherwise, this portion was really straightforward. I got through it really fast because I already had experience in my own PC building. So this portion was easy. Oh, the motherboard came with a USB stick where I could, or rather they say that installation drivers and stuff are included inside. But when we opened up the disk, there was nothing in there. It was empty. So I got a free thumb drive. And then here comes the really nerve-wracking part. So for some reason, I couldn't open up the box. I don't know why. Like, I removed all the sticker. Like, the bottom part came out a little bit already, but I can't remove the top part of the box. And I ended up pulling it apart, and the whole like internal box that was holding the Threadripper CPU fell out. It landed on my lap, luckily, but I panicked so hard in that moment, just like, oh. And everything comes with in the Threadripper, the CPU box. Now the thing about Threadripper is you have to use the tools that came with the Threadripper. There's a reason for it. There's a reason why they included it. Please use it. Okay, especially the wrench thing for you to tighten the screws on the connector. Please use that so that you don't over tighten and potentially damage the connector. So there's a reason why all those things came with. It's a really nicely little packaged like thing for a CPU, and like I think this was one of the few boxes that we actually kept after the PC was built. Like everything else was thrown away except for the Threadripper box. It was really nice little box. So basically what I did was after installing the CPU, I replaced the protection cover for the connector and I fitted it back into the tray that was holding the CPU in the box. And we basically put that on display, yeah, to say that, you know, we had that equipment, or rather we have that equipment. Now the actual installation of the CPU is nerve-wracking, but it was relatively straightforward. Just follow the manual. For things like this, just follow the manual. Okay, it looks like I'm touching the connector here, but I'm actually not. I was really scared that I'm gonna like twist a pin or something, so I was actually really careful with it. And this is the part whereby you actually hear the click of the wrench to tell you that there's enough tension and to stop tightening it. So there is a sequence to which one's supposed to get tightened first, but I've been doing them in like a clockwise direction, so they're all relatively tightened to the same degree, like progressively. So like at any point of time, one side is not particularly too tightened compared to the rest. But there is a sequence that you should follow when you're installing a Threadripper. It's all in the manual, just read the manual. Now the next part is the CPU cooler. We've got the Be Quiet Dark Rock Pro, the TR4 version, which is the one made for Threadripper. I actually applied the thermal paste and then I realized I was supposed to put in the RAM first before I installed the cooler, because the cooler is huge and I can't possibly fit the RAM in after I've installed the cooler. So I had to like take a pause there, put in the RAM sticks first, and then move on to the cooler. And for the RAM, we got the Corsair Vengeance, the low profile kind, which actually comes in just nice underneath the cooler fan. So this was really nice. We've got 4 sticks of 16GB each. So currently has 64GB of RAM. If we want to increase that to 128GB, we can. The layout of which channel to use on a Threadripper motherboard is a little bit... Actually, it's relatively the same. So you just have to follow the diagram. So on the left side, slot 1 and 3 will be the one that we are gonna populate first. And then on the right side is slot 2 and 4 that we'll populate first. So once the RAM goes in, we can install the CPU cooler. The good thing about this particular cooler, and the reason why I got it, is the ease of installation. They actually created these 2 like holes at the top that you can uncover by releasing the thumb screws, and that actually helps you fasten down the CPU cooler to the motherboard itself, which I find really like clever. That was the word. Yeah, so installing this was really easy, and I've seen some review about this particular CPU cooler. It has quite good reviews. It is quiet. I mean, having a brand called Be Quiet, you better be quiet. And the performance is relatively good. Now, I know most people with Threadripper builds would water cool their system. We cannot, because this PC potentially have to follow us out on our shows, and if you were to water cool the whole system, if there's any, you know, like bumps in the road, it's gonna be traveling in a vehicle with the rest of us and the rest of our equipment, so we can't afford a leakage, which is why we are not going for any form of water cooling. So far, performance purely on air cool is quite decent. So our average CPU temperature is about 56 degrees Celsius, which is about 10 degrees Celsius higher than my own PC, which is on the AIO, and I'm constantly in an air-conditioned room, which for our Threadripper computer might not always be. So it's temperature at which we are running like our base like softwares and processors. It's about 56 degrees Celsius, which is not too bad. Of course, when we're out on shows, we have the option of opening the side of the chassis to let more air in, but also let in more dust. But there is the option there for us. There is also actually a LCD at the side of the motherboard that you can actually see. This is not on currently, but that side LCD screen actually shows us the temperature of the CPU. So that was quite useful. I mean, it's not exactly helpful because it's in an enclosed case, but it is useful when we're out on shows and we do have the side panel open. We can actually see the temperature of the CPU. Now, next we are moving the motherboard into the chassis. I had to do some finagling with this. Like, it doesn't fit. Everything's a little bit too tight for some reason. Like, there's not a lot of clearance to like fit things in comfortably. There are points where I actually lifted the entire motherboard by holding onto the CPU cooler, and I'm pretty sure I'm not supposed to do that. But it was the only place that I had a good like grabbing point to, so that was what I used. But yeah, I'm pretty sure I'm not supposed to do that. So managed to screw everything in. The CPU cooler did block like one of the screws at a certain point, but I managed to get it down because I have a right angle like screwdriver, so I managed to tighten that up. And then next in line will be the PSU. We've got the Focus, the Seasonic Focus GX1000. It's the exact same one that I have in my own build, but this is the black version. So a full modular PSU. Now the strange part about this chassis is that because it's meant to be modular, right? So there is like a tray at the bottom that you're supposed to mount your PSU on. So you're not mounting it directly to the outside of your chassis, which is a bit strange because now I have like a 20 cm long IEC cable to connect the outside IEC port to my PSU IEC port, which I just find that weird. Like, why not just let me flush my PSU all the way out? But that's that. Then next is the graphics card. These are just really straightforward. Just slot that in. I'm slotting into the first slot. The clearance was just nice underneath the cooler. Like, I barely have enough space to like fit in the graphics card. And then our capture card, the Decklink Quad 2, which I think I might have been using the second lane. I'm not sure. Like, I think it's a higher chance of me using a third lane because it is a really thick graphics card. So probably the second lane of the PCI is already been blocked. So the capture card is on the third lane. I still have a fourth lane to add another capture card when we want to. Haven't exactly made up my like, do we want to get another SDI one or the HDMI one, because we do work with the HDMI content regularly. So that's that. And finally, cable management. Now this is the strange part about this chassis, which I didn't realize was an issue until I reached this point. So I decided to build my own computer first before I build up this Threadripper PC, partially because so that I have experience working on my own computer, so I know how it's like, so I don't get thrown off, you know. But the Lian Li chassis, they specifically like cleared out space for you to do cable management. Not the case with this chassis. So I had like really little space for me to run like my cables, and even if like they actually created like a center trunking area for you to like put all your cables, but even for that space I had to like flush all my cables to like flatten everything down so that, you know, it fits. The good thing about this build is that I'm using the stock cables that came with the PSU. Like my own one, I actually built custom cables for that. So those are a little bit like thicker and longer, so I do have a lot of slack that is taking up a lot of space behind, like at the back of my chassis. But for this case, I don't, which is a good and a bad problem. Like, good being, it's easier for me to run the cable because there's not a lot of slack. The downside being there's not a lot of slack, so I can't run the cable elsewhere, so that, you know, I create a clearer path. And this is also where I did a stupid. I did not plug in power for the CPU. Which, now that I think about it, there was a power like socket on the motherboard for my own like motherboard as well for the CPU, but I for some reason just forgot that's a thing on this build. So we couldn't turn on the computer, and I like panicked because I was so scared that I actually broke something, especially if I had broke like a pin on the CPU. It would have been disastrous because like that was like $2,000+ of like hardware. So that was like a panic moment, and then I realized that, oh wait, I actually have not plugged in a power cable. So plugged in the power cable and everything works. Updated the BIOS as well. There is a USB BIOS flash available for this motherboard, so updated the BIOS, make sure everything was running, and it's been running like smooth like butter ever since then. The export rate is fantastic. We run like long shows, like each of our shows are minimally an hour long. So you can think of like the kind of footage that we have to go through every day when we want to like export and convert those files. And those are the short sessions. Like we do have full day conferences. It's like an 8-hour long day of footage for you to go through and export. So we did do a test on this. We have other PC systems in the office. We do have an Intel machine that's running on a 2060. I forgot which generation of Intel it was, but we got that like last year or 2 years ago, so they're relatively new. So the time taken for both systems to export like an hour plus long footage for that system on the 2060, I think it was like 40 something minutes, which is about half the time of the actual like length of the show. So the time taken to export is like about half the time of your sequence timeline. Whereas for this Threadripper system, it was half the time of that 2060 system. So the same footage, the same file, same show file, took about 20 minutes. And we barely hit, I think, 50% of the GPU and CPU usage. Whereas on a 2060 system, the CPU was maxed at like 99, or I think it reached 100 even. So it's a big difference in terms of processing power on these two computers. So I'm very happy with this build. I think this is like my favorite if it wasn't for the fact that it's not my computer. Like if I own this, this would definitely be my favorite, but I'm still biased to my PC. So hopefully this is not my last PC build. I am really enjoying these builds. These are really fun, and I do have a few friends that are considering building their own PCs. They have been asking me about what to look out for, so I can help you build them. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you next time.